Welcome to Inspiration Rising. My name is David Trotter. I'm a business and life transformation coach dedicated to inspiring women and the men who support them to rise up in life, love, and business. Now, if you're a parent and you're trying to figure out how to sustain their lives and cause the least psychological damage to their little brains and maintain your own sanity in the process, I've got a great book for you. It is called Rage Against the Minivan, Learning to Parent Without Perfection by Kristen Howerton. It's available on Amazon right now via the link in our show notes. The great thing is it just came out available, and today I get to introduce you to the author herself. Kristen is not only the author of Rage Against the Minivan, but she's a licensed marriage and family therapist. She became the mother of 4 children within 4 years via birth and adoption. And she's the founder of the uber-popular blog, Rage Against the Minivan. She recently launched a podcast. She's the co-host of Selfie, and it's dedicated to exploring the mind, body, and spirit aspects of self-care. Now, I'll tell you, in all transparency, I first met Kristen and her then-husband Mark around 1999 when Mark and I were both pastors on staff at the same church. And our lives have intersected here and there. But frankly, I've mostly followed her growth as a blogger from a distance. Although my daughter did babysit their kids on occasion. Okay, I'll just take that as a little claim to fame. What am I talking about? There's nothing there. I tell you all that to say that Kristen is an amazing writer who shares her heart and soul and all the challenges in this book. And my hope is that this interview gives you just a taste of that book so that you'll ultimately go out and buy it. I will tell you this interview was recorded prior to the events that have happened in Minneapolis with George Floyd, as well as all of the protest and movement so we didn't dive into that, but we did talk about race, as well as all sorts of other subjects, including taking pictures of kids during meltdown, divorce, spirituality, all the things, okay? You're going to love it. Now, before we jump into the conversation, I want to remind you of 2 things. One, share the show. All right, if you love the Inspiration Rising, you listen to it on a regular basis, you listen to this episode, you think, oh my goodness, so-and-so would love to listen to this. Take a screenshot on your phone and just text it to them. Tell them to look for Inspiration Rising on their favorite podcast app. Also, as a reminder, I send out daily inspirational text messages via the name, so cheesy, Inspo Text. Yes, Inspo Text. I send it out every day. If you want to be a part of that and receive it, of course, you can unsubscribe at any point. It's 949-401-6090. All right, just text me right now, 949-401-6090. You can say, hi, Dave, and then it'll respond and you'll add yourself as a contact and we'll be BFFs. It'll be just amazing. Let's jump into my conversation with Kristen Howerton. Well, Kristen, thank you very much for taking some time to hang with me today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's fun to chat with you, Dave.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Your book is an interesting journey for me because I feel like I have known you from a distance for a lot of years. And to see you kind of share behind the scenes of your family. First of all, just thank you for your vulnerability and authenticity in that. Obviously, I would expect nothing less. But, man, I just felt like, I want to give you a big hug after the journey that you took me on through your book. First of all, let's talk about this term for those who don't know you, Rage Against the Minivan. What is that all about?
Yeah. It's a bit tongue in cheek because I do drive a minivan. But for me, it was just that idea of like, when I became a parent, I didn't want to lose myself to this sort of, prototypical mother in a minivan driving to soccer games. Like I really had a lot of fears around my identity being lost as a mom. And for me, buying that minivan felt like that sort of last bastion of like self-care, personal. I always joke that my minivan sits in my driveway covered in remnants of my self-esteem. But, the reality is it wasn't the minivan or any external things, whether it be not getting a mom haircut or, still trying to dress like I did before kids, or, it was really an inside job to figure out my identity as myself and also as a mom. That was really more of a spiritual journey and an emotional journey than it was making sure the optics looked the same.
Mm-hmm. One of the things you talk about early on in the book is being a good enough mom. You call it later on the world's okayest mom. Tell me, obviously that's quite a journey to get to that point, and I think a lot of moms feel uncomfortable maybe saying that, or but maybe there's a desire deep down. There's a lot of moms that are listening that probably feel like they are just the world's okayest mom. Why did you give yourself permission to take on that moniker?
Yeah, and I think, every mother's journey is different. And I definitely have friends who kind of arrived at I'm okay with being okay the minute that baby, entered their world. I and many of my friends, that wasn't the case for me. I think that I had just been so socialized through my life to perform well. And that came from my childhood, came from my Christian community. And then I was, as you know, because we were at the same church, I was a pastor's wife for a long time. And for me, it just felt like I needed to be more than okay. Like I needed to be performing and liked and good at things. And, I went through school like that. I liked getting good grades. And then when I got into a job, I liked getting good performance reviews. I really didn't have a sense of my own value and self-worth outside of external validation. So to learn to let that go as a mom, which I think you have to. There's no external validation coming to you as a mom in the younger years. Sure, when as adults you may get some lovely sentiments from your children showing the full gratitude of the job you're doing, but
That's only after they have kids, though.
I know, right? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, my kids have shown shown me some kindness in their teen years. But, at the end of the day, you're not getting a cookie or a pat on the back or a performance review or a grade for parenting well. And I was still kind of looking for that, in those early years, trying to just do it all right, make sure I, have them in the right clubs. And am I preparing them for the potential for a scholarship? And am I, am I feeding them the right organic foods? And, am I making their baby food homemade? And there was a lot when I was parenting, and I'm sure this is still true for, parenting younger kids. There was a lot of like performative motherhood and almost competitive motherhood. You picked a side and you baby wore all the time, or you showed everybody how much you used cloth diapers, and it was a big thing. It was a big identity. It wasn't just like a little choice, like it was like an identity. And I got wrapped up in that. I got wrapped up in doing it right, and that was exhausting. Really exhausting. And also I just feel like I came to learn, by the time I had my fourth child, it's also just futile. Like they're just gonna kind of turn out how they turn out, I mean, with a fourth kid, like there's no like trying to do things right. You're just trying to swim and survive. And you're forced to chill out a little bit. Yeah.
It's at that point, it's just sustaining life, keeping them alive and fed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you take us on the journey of miscarriages and infertility and adoption and lots of twists and turns. One of the things that you shared that was so poignant to me, my wife and I have experienced 3 miscarriages at different points in time. And you said in the chapter, it's entitled Ready, Set, Nope. I can't refer to the chapter numbers because there are none.
I know, not in the advanced reader copy. It's so annoying.
Oh, so there are in the actual...
There will be numbers in the actual book.
Good Lord.
I know.
Ready, Set, Nope. How to fail at motherhood before you even start. You write, this is a part of the unspoken pain of infertility. No one means to drop you as a friend, but the statute of limitations on sadness and moping eventually runs out. I know that there are many people that are listening that have had, those challenges of whether it be infertility or miscarriage combination. How did you navigate that time of going, gosh, I am so sad and I want to talk about it, but yet it seems like there's only so much that people can listen over time. Mm-hmm. Even what words of encouragement would you share today to maybe people that are listening that are in that situation?
Well, I will say, one thing that was unique to me, but I think is also the case for many women. I am really, really afraid of being a burden. Like that is a fear that is overblown for me and probably unrealistic. And I can't quite put my finger on where that developed, although I have some theories, but I just really didn't want to be a burden. And the result is sometimes people were pulling away from me because naturally people do pull away from grieving people. I mean, that's just the truth. It's the sad truth. If you've ever walked a friend through some really hard stuff, there is that sort of flight to health. Like I can't, I can't do this anymore. It really does take a lot of loyalty and tenacity to walk a friend through grief. But that being said, I also think that I was almost rejecting before I was rejected. Like I wasn't letting people in. I was scared of being a burden. And so I didn't even, want to approach that. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up feeling very alone. And then I think I had friends who probably could have and would have been there for me that I just did that. I'm fine. Everything's fine. I did that thing. And to my detriment.
Yeah. I love how you interweave your own spiritual journey into the book. And one of the ways that you do that is through the process of miscarriages and infertility. And you write, Christians don't like to sit with the idea that sometimes God doesn't save us from our pain. Mm-hmm. And when that inevitably happens, because pain and suffering are part of the human experience, we have a crisis of faith. And that idea that God doesn't save us from our pain, that's a very unchristian thing to say of Kristen. That's sacrilegious.
Right? I mean, it does feel a little sacrilegious to say, which is scary. Because if we can't say that sometimes God doesn't save us from our pain, then what we're really saying is, if God doesn't save us from our pain, we have failed somehow. We have, that's the other side of that. That if we don't believe that there is pain and suffering in the world, and it's equally available to anyone, mm-hmm. Then if we can't accept that, then our only other alternative is to believe that by being good enough, we can somehow have God save us. And I just don't believe that that's true. My experience tells me that is not true. I've seen you and I have a mutual friend who was an amazing mother, mm-hmm. who died of cancer, mm-hmm. And she was one of the best people I knew. Mm. So, I just, and yet, when she died, people had a crisis of faith. People around her had a crisis of faith. I had a crisis of faith when I felt like things were not, when I felt like everything was going wrong. And I think I wish I would have, in my religious upbringing, been given more permission to acknowledge the universality of suffering and to be prepared for it, rather than thinking, well, you can just pray and, God will take care of every discomfort. Like, well, he'll comfort us. I believe that. But we might sit through some shit, all of us, probably.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So you brought up that there's a sense that, man, if I could be good enough, then God will protect me either ahead of time or somehow rescue me in the midst of that. But let's say I don't believe that, but then I just believe then that God is like not loving, right? Not mm-hmm. kind, or not all powerful.
Yeah.
Like how do you process through that in regard to the pain that you've experienced?
I think that is where that crisis of faith comes in, because we love to deal in opposites, don't we? And, it's like if God isn't this God that maybe I learned in some prosperity gospel form of my religious upbringing, then I guess, he must just be unmerciful and unloving. Mm-hmm. But I think what we have to relearn is that mercy and love and compassion don't always look like rescue from pain. And, I think for those of us who are parents, it is a little easier to conceptualize that, because we don't do that to our own children.
Right.
I've had to sit with the discomfort of my own children and not rescue them from heartaches that maybe are not life-shattering, but to a 13-year-old, they sure feel like it, Yeah. And I can't always save them from their pain, but I can comfort them and I can love them. And I think where that becomes really difficult for people is when they feel hurt by God or betrayed or let down, to then move into a place of vulnerability of, okay, well, you didn't take the pain away, but I'm going to let you comfort me. That's hard. That can be a really hard shift to say, I will trust you enough to comfort me, even if I don't feel like you're going to magically make everything be okay. And I think that's where we've got to come, is just being vulnerable with, okay, God, I'm going to lay it at your feet without expectation that you're going to intervene, mm-hmm. but with the expectation that you will comfort, because that's promised. That is promised. Mm-hmm. A life of pain and suffering is not promised, but God's comfort to us is always there.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. You talk about in your book the shift that you made, a conscious choice to go kind of move beyond that external validation as a mom. And you write that you made a conscious choice every single day to just be with my kids, just reading this book to them, just singing this lullaby, just lying here and cuddling. These things were thankless and they were immeasurable, but they were the work of motherhood in those years, not being a super mom, but being a mom who was present in the moments that matter. And that is a huge theme of your book, is saying that you have chosen to make certain things important. And you go later in the book into those exact things, it's an amazing list. We can talk about that later. But at what point in your 4 kids, did you kind of have that shift? Was it with the first one, second one? Was it a combination?
I think with the first one, I was still under the illusion that I could just do it all and, perform and I don't know, have a Pinterest perfect life. And I think with the second one, bringing a second child home, I had a toddler and a baby, was like, okay, like this is kind of breaking. But, then I brought child 3 and 4 home within a few months of each other. Well, I birthed Karis, and then her brother came home from Haiti. And all of that happened in the course of a year. And that was when it was like, okay, this is over. Yeah. This is chaos. And also, this isn't what my kids need from me. Like, they don't need me to be a perfect PTA mom, or they don't need or care if, their lunch is artistically created in a bento box. Now, I want to say, if those are things that bring people life, they should do those things.
Sure, of course.
For me, they were exhausting me. And so those were some things that I said, I'm going to opt out of these things. I'm going to opt out of the things that, for me, feel like performative motherhood as opposed to present motherhood. Yeah. And that's different for every woman. And, I think that's really important too. And I feel like I harp on that in the book a lot. My editor was like, you don't need to maybe repeat that again. I'm like, yes, I do.
Yeah.
Just that, we're all different. And what feels performative to me may feel like self-care to someone else. And we all have to kind of know ourselves. And what feels like self-care to me might feel performative to other people. Mm-hmm. And it's just knowing, am I drained by doing this, or do I feel like this gives me life, or this brings my family closer, or this adds a benefit to the bonding in our family, as opposed to, is this the thing that I'm doing to make myself look like a good mom?
Yeah. Yeah. You started your blog in what year?
2007.
2007. So it's been about 13 years. So
yeah,
the kids were very young. And some didn't even come into the world prior to that.
Yeah.
Would you say that possibly there was more of a, whether it be a tendency or a feeling like that you needed to perform because you were choosing to, create a kind of a public perception of your family,
Yeah.
So where some moms, they don't have that, you know what I mean? They're just existing.
Yes.
Do you feel like that was more of a tendency for you because of that? Friend, if you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or have a side hustle, and you're having challenges growing your business, what if I told you that you are one call away from a breakthrough? One of the primary reasons why people work with me as a business strategist and coach is that I know how to get stuff done, and I can teach you as well. If you're feeling stuck, you don't know what your next step is in business, you're trying to expand your business, you're trying to do marketing, you're trying to figure out strategy, I want to invite you to set up a free 20-minute clarity call so that I can understand more about your situation and see if you're a good fit for my one-on-one business strategy and coaching program. All you need to do is go to insporising.com/call. That's insporising.com/call.
Yes. I mean, it drove me to blog, and then that kept a hamster wheel running for sure. It's like when, and this is, I know that there are different personalities, and this is different for different people. If people are familiar with the Enneagram, I'm a 3. So, I'm wired to want to produce and perform. That's how I feel okay about myself. That's how I deal with my deep shame, Dave. Yeah. But I do think that I'm a young mom. I've pulled myself out of a career. I've pulled myself out of grad school. I've pulled myself out of these settings where I could get a pat on the back, a cookie, a star for being good. And now I'm just sitting at home with kids who just cry all the time. And, I do think that there was a little bit of oh, what's this blogging thing? So I could kind of show and tell on a blog and get people to like me on a blog, and show that I'm a good mom and have someone tell me that. It's just me looking for external validation, very much so. And then the problem there is then as that grows, then you feel like you have to keep looking for that external validation. Sure. And then when that shifted over to being my livelihood, and I was actually, earning a living, earning an income on the blog, then it really felt performative motherhood. So it was weird because I'm preaching against performative motherhood, and yet I'm in this hamster wheel of having to keep doing it kind of. Yeah. And I think that is why, for people who've read my blog for a long time, I do think I shifted into more of a space of real vulnerability. And I really pushed back against, I'm not going to show rosy colored photos. I'm not, even if I do those things at home that, I'm going to make this a narrative of a struggling mom who doesn't have it figured out, because that was the only truthful way I could do it. Mm-hmm.
Why did you wait so long to write a book? You have had, pretty big success over the last decade. And why wait so long?
Yeah, I have some folks at Convergent who have asked me the same thing. I just felt really overwhelmed by that. I did. And, I was offered a book deal without a proposal, several years ago. And I had an agent, and then I had another agent. I had an agent who basically was like, "All right, so you're just never going to write a book, so maybe we should dissolve this contract." I I think I felt overwhelmed. I never really saw myself as a writer. I was a blogger, but I don't know. I think it was a self-esteem issue. I think it was that sort of fear of being a fraud. Like I'm not really a writer. I just have a blog, I think it was some of that. And then I think by the time I was kind of ready to write the book, my life was imploding. I was going through a divorce, and it felt like this is not the time to throw myself into that. This is the time to hunker down, really be present with my kids as we kind of walk through that life transition. And then it felt like once we'd kind of found our new normal of, living, having a co-parenting family, then it felt like, okay, now I can do this.
You have a chapter that highlights a well-known Instagram account that you created, Asshole. What is the
Asshole Parents? Yeah,
it's just Asshole Parents.
It's just Asshole Parents. Yeah.
And so, tell me how this came about and how it has gained traction, or why do you think it's gained traction?
Yeah, well, it came about. I mean, it truly was the most organic thing. It came about when I took a picture of my daughter mid tantrum. She had her head down on the table, so she couldn't see me snapping a photo, but the scenario was that her siblings were away at school and she was feeling a little lonely. And so I created this cute little lunch with her teddy bears, and I used all pink plates and, made her lunch exactly how she loves it and let her wear a princess dress and set down a pink cup, and I'd made her a pink smoothie. And then she burst into tears, and I'm like, what? And she was crying because there was a yellow straw in the pink cup. And she was just very offended by my lack of style, and obvious, disdain for her for giving her a yellow straw. So I just, I'm sitting there going at first feeling angry, are you freaking kidding me, you little brat, And then I'm like, you just have to laugh. So I took a picture of it. I posted the story, and I hashtagged it Asshole Parent because she thinks I'm an asshole for the yellow straw. And I mean, people were laughing and leaving their own comments. And then I just kind of started using that hashtag myself. Sure. And then I noticed other people starting to use the hashtag. And then I thought, you know what? We need an account that's just curating all of this, because I feel like parents need to know they are not alone in their kids their kids being upset by ridiculous things. Because it's a universal parent thing. I mean, especially that, 2 to 5 set. Yeah. It is universal that a child will cry because you give them a broken cookie, or cry because you try to have them not put their finger in a socket, Yeah. And I think it became so popular so fast because it was such a departure from what we were being fed online by most influencers, which was these sort of washed out ethereal photos of dreamy mother life, Sure. And this was just kind of let's talk about what it's really like, which is kids being mad at us over ridiculous things.
I love the list that you created in the book, some examples of how you've ruined your toddler's life, not allowing them to stand on the counter, requiring them to sit in car seats. Oh, every parent.
Tyranny.
Yes. Not allowing them to play with dog poop. That is, how dare you?
I know. Yeah. I'm a monster.
Not allowing them to play with power tools. And then I love, as you go older with the teenage years, here are a number of things that will really tick off a teenager. Making eye contact.
Don't do that.
Breathing. Mm-hmm. Dressing like you're trying to be young and cool. Dressing like you're old. Attempting to talk to them about crushes or life goals. Oh, my goodness. Cheering for them at a sporting event.
So embarrassing.
I love this one. Using memes or attempting to understand memes, or simply saying the word meme.
Yeah, my kids, I mean, it's so funny because it's they're mad at you for not being cool, but if you make any effort to be cool, they're equally mad, right? Yeah. oh my gosh, your music's so lame. And then so you try to put on like, something they like and they're like, oh, Mom, so dumb. It's so like, you can't win. You can't win.
Yeah. A question for you on, I don't even know if I have the right language for it, but there is a movement among parents to go maybe in the other direction, or concerned that you might be shaming your kids or other kids, by posting photos of them. How do you process that if somebody said, man, I can't believe you would say that, because ultimately your kid's going to see this photo, later on, or they're going to see you taking the picture, you're shaming them, they're going to feel shamed.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you had concerns about your own kid and how they would process that, I mean, I've always said, and one of the rules of the account has kind of been like, we don't accept videos. Like, people try to send us videos. We're like, we're not about videoing a kid. Mm-hmm. And we don't want it to look like a kid is like being caught, if that makes sense. Like, it's supposed to be like, a photo that you snap while they are unaware, while they are in the throes of a tantrum. Yeah. And then in terms of like kids seeing it or knowing, I have always been really open with my kids. I mean, I wasn't showing them these photos when they were 2 and 3, but I stopped taking those photos when they were, 4 or 5. I mean, I think it's a small window where this sort of works. Although I'll take other photos that, I'll then check in with them. But my own kids think that account and that their presence on that account is so funny. Like, they think it's hilarious.
Yeah.
And then now if I post an asshole parent photo, it'll be more of an inside joke. And, they give me approval on what I post. Mm-hmm. They follow me and they let me know if, don't post that. There's a lot of that.
If people don't know your family, one of the things that you share in the book is that you adopted 2 Black boys, and then you gave birth to 2 white girls. And, when you share about this experience, I'd love for you to talk about this for a little bit, because some of the stories that you tell are just heartbreaking. The basketball scene, maybe you can even just take us through that moment at how this has accentuated or created an even heightened awareness for you of how people treat, your kids differently, and how people treat others differently. Would you mind taking us to that basketball scene for a moment and just giving people an overview of that?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I feel like the disparities in how my boys are treated versus my girls has sort of changed as they've aged. And so, the basketball scene I wrote in the book about was really about younger kids. 2 boys didn't want to hold hands with my boys because they were brown. And then I talked to the parents of those children, and the parents were very defensive and said, I don't know why he would have said that, because we've always told him to never talk about race. Which, the problem there is, if you tell a child to never talk about race, then the message is that race is problematic. If they're not allowed to talk about a skin color, then that skin color is scary or bad or problematic. That's the messaging. And so, do I think those little kids were racists? I don't. I just think that they'd gotten some weird messages, and the parents just had a lot of defensiveness around talking about race. And the result of that is kids act in weird ways. When we can't be open and honest with them about race, they're going to learn and fill in the blanks just from what they're seeing in society, which is probably not the best. I mean, it's just like sex. It's like, if you don't talk to your kids about sex, they're still going to learn about sex, and their education is probably going to be terrible, and so that, I think that is more of like grouping and sorting and kids experimenting with exclusion. Mm-hmm. But it's been interesting as they've moved into teenage years, and what I'm noticing there is just how often they're looked at with suspicion by other adults, and how often they are kind of questioned about, should you be here, or where are you going? One of my sons was threatened with arrest for skating through a college campus that lies between his father's house and mine. So he was, cutting through a college campus and was threatened to be arrested.
Yeah.
And, he has friends who go and skate there all the time who are his age, 15-year-old white kids, and no one else I know has been threatened with arrest. Mm-hmm. So, it's just, I'm noticing the way the world treats them differently. Mm-hmm. I'm noticing just the kind of bias that, there is, just a concern or assumption that, maybe they're going to be involved in behavior that they shouldn't be. When in reality, they're both, really great kids. I mean, they're also really normal kids, and also, they also might break rules from time to time. And then it's a little scary because, behavior that would be considered not great, but age appropriate, sure. For them is suddenly like, I had a teacher recently tell me about something one of my boys did, and they were goofing off during a Zoom call. And then she said, and then he fled the scene. And that's how she described him walking out of the frame of a Zoom call.
Yikes.
And it's just that kind of language where, that might sound paranoid, but when you hear that kind of language repeatedly towards two of your kids and never to your other two, just language, like kind of criminality language, like fled the scene.
Karis fled the scene.
I know. I'm like, he fled the scene to the other side of the living room. The room's not that big. Like, how big is the frame? How hard can I flee out of this frame? Yeah. But, just stuff like that just these little microaggressions, no one's walking up to them and, well, they have been called the N-word, actually, by peers in texts. That has certainly happened too. But, almost as concerning is these microaggressions where, had I called that teacher out, I'm sure she would have said, "How dare you? That's not what I meant."
Right.
But I don't know. It's tough.
That is really hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we do live in an area, unfortunately, where there are not a lot of black kids or black people at all. Uh-huh. It's primarily Latino and white,
Yes.
So I see them around skateboarding, either by themselves or with friends.
Yeah.
And it is interesting, the emotional or psychological reaction when I see them. I have a concern for them. Yeah. Like when I see them out, and
totally.
I feel very parental, and I don't even know them that well. My kids know your kids, but I don't really know them. But I feel very parental. Like if I'm around, I just want to see, are they okay? Because I can imagine somebody saying or doing something really wacky, and Jack is a big kid.
He is a big kid.
And he looks like he's a lot older than he is.
He does. And we've had to have those talks. Like, when kids are around the neighborhood, they like to do neighborhood-wide hide and seek. We live on a little loop. And I'm like, boys, there is no way you're going to go hide in bushes in front of people's houses.
Yeah, not good.
At 6 foot tall. There's no way.
Yeah, at dusk.
Yeah, there's just no way. Or even, we're in this, season of a pandemic and they put masks on, and my son, went to go get food from the local high school and put a mask on and popped his hoodie up. And I'm like, oh, no, that's not a good look. Like, I know what that's going to lead people to think. And so then I'm finding him a surgical mask because I don't want him wearing a black mask. And it's all this tap dancing that shouldn't need to be done. But it needs to be done.
Why do you do it then?
To keep them safe. And I want them to come home alive. And it sucks because you have to make concessions that you shouldn't have to make because it's just the most important that they come home safe. And so you have to tell your kids that they can't ever mouth off at a cop. And if a cop is being disrespectful, we say all the time, don't get mad, we'll get even later. That is our mantra. If you are in a situation with an abusive cop, you do not call them out. You don't say anything. You keep your mouth shut, and then mom will hire an attorney.
Sure. Right.
But it's just, rule number one is come home alive.
Yeah.
And it sucks that a 13 and 15-year-old have to think about that, but they do. And, you mentioned we live in Orange County, and that is difficult. And I've been really fortunate that they've been really embraced through the 100 Black Men organization. And so they're in mentoring programs with them. And so they have a lot of adult Black men kind of speaking into their lives. Because, what are they going to listen to? White mom? They really need to get those lessons from other people who are walking this. Mm-hmm. So that's been really helpful.
Mm-hmm. You used a term on a different topic in the book called Dad Privilege. And I talk about this on our podcast, from time to time with moms. Maybe unpack that word for us. I'm sure the ladies listening will be like, oh yeah, I get that. But what is dad privilege, and how did you experience it?
Yeah, I experienced dad privilege. I opened that chapter with a scene of when I was married still. We were sitting down there at Christmas morning, and the kids are opening the gifts, and my ex-husband is, at every gift, like, oh my gosh, you got, a Dora doll? That's so cool. Oh my gosh, you got a scooter? That's so cool. And I realized halfway through, he actually hasn't seen any of these gifts. He actually doesn't know what is wrapped under the tree. He is experiencing all of this in real time because I bought, I planned, I wrapped, all of it was pulled off by me. And that's just a little example of, some of that invisible work, and it's a small example, but it's that invisible work that women do, that we do because we intuitively know to do it because our mothers did it. And it looks like, when you get the email that they need, a black long sleeve t-shirt for their drama performance and they don't have one, you go and order it. Or when you get the email that the soccer team needs to have this color, socks and shin guards, you go and grab that. Or when you get the soccer schedule, you put it all in the calendar. Or when there's a class party, you go ahead and order the thing that you need for the class party. And my experience, both personally and in pretty much every friend I know, is that it's the women doing this invisible work. That if men, and it's not that I think that men are entitled assholes. I actually think that this is much more of a systemic issue where our dads didn't do this work.
Right. Therefore,
men are not aware of this work. And women have been socialized to not talk about this work because we might sound like we're nagging, which, we've been trained as, that's the very worst thing that you could do would be to nag your man because, goodness, then he'll grow tired of you and leave or something.
Right,
I don't know. But it's just, this is stuff that's really kind of not on men's radars. And they're not, I think that it's kind of a muscle that has not been developed by a lot of men. Mm-hmm. Then they might say, well, just make me a list, make me a list. But the problem there in the making of the list is the onus still goes back to us to sort of request and supervise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it's still our mental load if we're making the list.
Right.
And a lot of times
I will go shopping. Give me the list. She goes, I don't want 10 calls from here at the grocery store. I don't want that. I'd rather just go do it myself. I'm like,
yeah. Well, and what I want, and I say this all the time in my house too, is I don't want to be the only one doing all the thinking. I want someone else to open the fridge, take the inventory all to the same level that I would, and then go and do it and just show up with it the same way I would, because I wouldn't make any phone calls if I went grocery shopping, And I think, and I don't want to sound like I'm bashing men. I just really think we're in a weird sandwich generation where so many of us, we want to be in egalitarian marriages. A lot of us have that goal. Maybe we have 2 working parents or 2 working spouses. The problem is, for so many of us, we didn't watch our parents have an egalitarian marriage. And the unfortunate truth of marriage is we so often, in many ways, revert to the behavior of our parents, of what was modeled. And I just think we're forging a new path here, and we're having to learn new behaviors that weren't modeled to us. And a lot of it, unfortunately, the learning curve is for the men to step up, but then for women to step back, because it doesn't work unless we step back too.
Right.
Yeah.
You were very transparent about your marriage and divorce, and how painful that was. And I was, interested in how you feel comfortable sharing openly your part, but yet at the same point, it's kind of sharing his part too. And yet you're also saying, well, this is how he perceives me, so you're kind of taking part. It's a very interesting chapter in terms of you balancing. I don't even know if balancing is the right word, but maybe navigating through all of those emotions and feelings. And one of the things that you share is how difficult it was to go Christian, blogger, mom, and then, I'm waiting to go public. Then I go public. I mean, I don't even know what my question is. It's just such so I can't even imagine the pain and anguish and the process. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At what point did you finally say, okay, I'm going to go public with this. I'm going to tell people.
Mm-hmm. Too late, to be honest. I mean, the point at which I went public was when they were just rumors. I mean, there were rumors that I was dating someone, and there were rumors that my husband was on dating sites, and those things were true. The issue was that we'd been divorced for a year and a half, and no one knew that. And so I was, and it's not that I really wanted to be secretive. It's that, again, I was in that stage of really wanting to hunker down and focus on my kids. And I didn't want to be focused on managing a narrative. I mean, anyone who was paying close attention, Mark had been off my social media for 3-4 years, And so, I think that many people, who were paying close attention knew that we were no longer together. But, there were just rumors swirling, and it's like I wasn't ahead of them. And there just became this disparity of my real life where my close friends all knew everything, and they knew my boyfriend, and, everything was kosher. And then, just people who didn't know me, and then the rumor mill. So I really was kind of forced to address it. I didn't want to, but my friends were like, you gotta talk about this, because I'm getting, like, close friends of mine were, getting people in their ear, like, so is Kristen, and it's like, okay, my friends were like, okay, we've got to do this. And, like, literally gave me a deadline. Like, you're going to write this and talk about it by this day. So, because I just wanted to crawl in a hole, and and it was embarrassing. I felt shame about having a divorce, because I was a marriage and family therapist for 15 years. And then in the process of even how to write about that and how much is appropriate to share, because, it's on the internet and my kids will read it someday. And if my kids were grown, I think that what I shared would have been very different than, what I did share. But then, yes, in the writing of the book, just not wanting to go into details. And I think I'm equally hard on myself in the book. I think I own my parts.
Yeah, you do a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And I worked hard on that chapter. Probably, I probably had more eyeballs on that chapter than any other, just asking friends like, hey, am I being fair? Am I being, am I throwing him under the bus? Am I being, I just really wanted to be fair, and tell this story.
Did Mark read it beforehand?
No, he didn't want to read it. No.
Yeah. So he chose you gave him the option, but he chose not to.
I definitely requested he read it many, many times.
Interesting.
he chose not to.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. No more questions on that. Yeah. Very fascinating. Yeah. No, I thought you were very, there are not words to, I think of the word fair-handed, but, like you said, you really did navigate that, I thought, very well.
Thank you.
One last quote that I want to end with, and it's actually the last lines of the book. And for those of you who are listening, Kristen's exploration of the things that I'm bringing up just pales in comparison to how she eloquently takes you through the journey in the book. So please don't feel like you've only gotten like a half of 1% of our conversation. You need to get the book for sure. So you write at the very end, you say, the more we can tell our truths, especially the hard and uncomfortable ones, the less alone and broken we'll feel. Perhaps there is less wrong with us and more wrong with the expectations we put on ourselves. Perhaps we're good enough just as we are.
Yeah. And that is, I wrote that for me as much as for anyone else. That's still an ongoing challenge for me. That, I think it's true. I think it's true cognitively. But, I think, I think it's almost a discipline to just be okay. It is for me anyway.
Good. Rage Against the Minivan, Learning to Parent Without Perfection. Kristen, wow. Bestseller, without a doubt. It'll be a bestseller somehow, some way. People are going to love it. Yeah, it's really, really good. And encourage people to pick it up. It comes out on
June 9th.
June 9th, yes. Which, sure, we'll release the podcast on that day. We'll make it easy for you. It'll be available on Amazon. Of course, I'm sure you can pre-order it now. So, Kristen, thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave. It was fun to talk to you.
If you found this episode inspiring or helpful, please share it with a friend. Take a screenshot, text it to them, tell them to search for and subscribe to the Inspiration Rising podcast on their favorite podcast app. It might be Stitcher, Spotify, Apple, Google, any of those. Tell them to search and click subscribe. Also, if you want to receive my daily inspirational text messages, text me now at 949-401-6090. That's 949-401-6090. If you forgot the number, you don't want to hit rewind, it's in the show notes. You can swipe up on your phone, say, hello, Dave, and then I'll add you as a contact. And hey, you'll get inspirational text messages every day. It'll be awesome. All right. Love you guys. Have a wonderful week.